going to talk about good old days tonight, right? And we've
Yeah.
been needing to touch on this for a while. Just
We
let it
have, and
rip.
this seems like the appropriate time now. Yeah.
Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
Look at that. I remember when this first aired. Remember? This was the first big spin-off from Star Trek The Next Generation. I think I was all excited.
It was the first time we had more than one Star Trek series going at the same time.
I remember this
ran contemporaneously with the chronology of Star Trek The Next Generation.
TNG. And this was going on. I think this aired in the winter, if I recall, right? First aired?
I remember, I don't remember when it first aired. I just remember that much of the season here in the Chicago area was interrupted by the local ball games. And so I never got to see Deep Space Nine at its regularly scheduled time.
Well,
I'd always end up having to watch it at midnight on Saturday or some kind of crazy crap like that. And it ticked me off really bad. I think to this day there are some Deep Space Nine episodes I haven't seen.
To this day, I've not seen the series all the way through from beginning to end. I've always seen it in pieces. Like I would catch an episode here and there. It's one of these shows I do plan one day to sit down from beginning to end and watch the whole thing straight through.
Yeah.
Maybe this will be my next classic series because I don't think I'm going to get through X-Files season 6. I think I got to cut the cord.
Okay.
X-Files got bad in season 6. No, because nobody really wanted to be working on the show at that point. Let's not split hairs here. Anyway,
there you go.
There we go. We have our cast. We have Benjamin Sisko, who was played by
Avery Brooks.
Avery Brooks, yes. And look at this. We have Chief O'Brien. We have Jadzia Dax. We have Major Kira.
Kira Nerys, that's right.
And Dr. Bashir. Look at this
Dr.
cast,
Bashir.
huh?
Yep.
And it's interesting. I think my brother at his graduation ceremony, Avery Brooks, actually spoke there. This is before he got cast on Deep Space Nine. So he had smaller parts on other shows, but he was
he was a spin-off from, I forget which show it was. He got a spin-off called Man Called Hawk.
Was it like from Hunter or something like that? Or?
Yeah, I think it was something like that, yeah.
January 3rd, 1993. I remember being excited for this because it was the winter, and it's like, well, what do I have to look forward to at the end of January on it? And then it's like, but
right.
No, it was airing, so I got excited to watch this. I had a good pilot too, as I recall.
The pilot was, man, that was a gut punch. I tell you, there is nothing that will start off a series better than capturing people with that pilot episode. We made similar comments about the first episode of Twin Peaks, right? When I talked about how the actress who played Laura Palmer's mother, just her grief at finding out about her daughter's death is just so heart-wrenching. It just grabs you right there. Well, the very opening of Deep Space Nine, of course, is set during the Battle of Wolf 359.
Yep.
That great two-part Next Gen episode, The Best of Both Worlds. And you find out that Benjamin Sisko's ship, the Saratoga, where he was, I want to say he was the first officer. And again, remember, this was an era when they had families aboard Federation ships. So he was there with his wife and son.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the ship was destroyed, and he and his son managed to get out on the lifeboat. His wife did not.
You see the ship blow as they're leaving too.
Yes,
and of course, who was leading the charge was Locutus of Borg.
Of course, the assimilated Captain Picard.
So yeah, that was fascinating that they started the episode, the series that way, and kind of a gut punch. And then of course it goes into the present where he's been giving a new commander post out on this basically
decommissioned mining, decommissioned Cardassian mining base. Near Bajor. So it's very clear that those that want to say that Star Trek was always topical and progressive and so on and so forth. Yes, that's true. When it was good, it was. And if you think of, I did not know that Rene Aubergenois was descended from the Bonapartes, but I can easily believe that. Absolutely. But the Cardassians were very much analogous to a certain national socialist group from World War II.
Yes, they were the equivalent of that in the Star Trek.
And the Bajorans would be analogous to the people that those people put into locations to think really hard.
Yes, there's a World War II style analogy.
So imagine, instead of Germany getting carved up, by the Allied powers, the Federation comes in and establishes a détente, tries to form at least neutral relationship with the Cardassians and kind of help the Bajorans. They're trying to convince the Bajorans to join the Federation. They're kind of not too fired up because in World War II, the U.S. came to help the Allied powers. Well, in the battle between Bajor and Cardassia, Federation stayed neutral. They were, prime directive, we can't get involved. So now we come along and say, hey, come join us. And they're like,
because the Federation had a war with the Cardassians, right?
True. That's exactly right.
So the Federation, they start stirring, they're in a war again. I think that's what the reasons was. Like, I think Picard made a point when he was going to Bajor and then said, look, you were beyond our borders. We couldn't, and of course they were a little resentful to the Federation for not helping out. They had to fight the resistance on their own, right? That was basically what happened.
Exactly. Accounting Sheep says the allegory was about as subtle as a brick, as usual for Star Trek.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely fair. I mean, because, again, I made reference to the Allied forces, right? What was one of the Allied forces? Russia. And the Klingons were always the allegory for Russia. So,
one wonders why modern Star Trek didn't try doing that with the modern world, trying to make analogous races and settings.
They did, but unfortunately they were incredible. Not only were they subtle as a brick, but they were very ham-handed and very one-sided. At least back then, the writers would be try to be as even with their analogy as possible, Yeah. Especially, like I said, the Klingons being analogous to the Russians. You see that really well, not only in the original series, right, where they're the antagonists, they're just the baddies, just like the Klingons were during the Cold War, but as you go through Glasnost and all that kind of stuff, and then, of course, the meltdown of Chernobyl, well, then you get Star Trek VI, right, where you have the destruction of Praxis and the peace conference, the Khitomer Peace Conference, and all that, to the point that by Next Gen, they're like allies. They're not, friends, but they're allies, right? And it was very, very similar to what we've seen with the Russians over time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And it's so weird not hearing that background noise. Sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I wish I'd realized that was the case. I would have...
Well, I thought I only heard it through my headphones. I didn't know even if it was coming in over the set.
Oh, okay.
But here is our lead actor, lead character, Benjamin Sisko, starts out as a commander, becomes a captain later in the series because, of course... We'll get to that in a little bit.
Right.
Notice how his look completely changes when things change too. He shaves his head and gets the goatee as opposed to having the hair in the earlier seasons because his demeanor has to change a little bit too because we're in for harder times.
Exactly.
There's Jadzia Dax. What was her race again? The Trill? Is that what it was called?
Yep. She's from the Trill, which is a joined race. They're humanoid in every appearance, but they have a kind of a symbiote inside of them that allows them to share memories and this symbiote has had many lifetimes before, So while Jadzia has only the memories of her lifetime until she's joined, now she remembers all these other lifetimes. In a way, there's almost like a Doctor Who-esque kind of, analog here with the Trill. And what's interesting here is that Jadzia Dax carries the Dax symbiote, who previously had been an older man by the name of Corazon Dax, who had been good friends with Benjamin Sisko.
In fact, wasn't he like a Starfleet mentor for him?
Exactly right.
He was
yes. He had mourned the death of his friend only to realize he's kind of still alive in Jadzia, and Jadzia has all those memories. Do you remember the time you did this and that? And the time we went in
Kazon. That's the thing.
Exactly. And so he starts referring to her as old man.
Yes.
Which is,
kind of
to most people, kind of weird, but for them, it's absolutely normal.
But she was her own personality before she joined, too, so it's weird. Oh, that's right, Space Fraggle. Benjamin Sisko does become the emissary. I know you've talked about this before, how he meets these omnipotent aliens called the Prophets, which
so the
Bajorans get very angry about. There are deities, don't call them aliens.
Right, exactly. and let's be honest here. The whole framing element is that we've come to try and help Bajor recover from their occupation and convince them to join the Federation. That's really the only reason we're here. We're reaching out to equally advanced alien species that needs to be propped up, and we want to get them to join the Federation to expand the Federation. There's all kinds of great politics there. I'm really glossing over it. But what happens is, as they're there, they find out that Bajor, or the Bajor system, and the mining facility in orbit around Bajor are very near to the opening of a wormhole, a stable wormhole in space that leads to the Gamma Quadrant, literally the other side of the galaxy. And through time and history, you start to find out that the presence of this wormhole has kind of shaped a lot of the history and mythology of the Bajoran people. For example, the Prophets are the aliens that live within this wormhole. They created this wormhole. They are non-corporeal beings, and we've encountered them in Star Trek before. They just don't have a body. They're consciousness. Obviously advanced because they could create this stable wormhole, but they're also non-linear. They exist outside of time and space. So they don't see time as a natural progression of cause and effect. They see all of time at once. And to be honest with you, that sounds very much like a god, right?
Yes.
There's in fact one Judeo-Christian model of God that says that it's not that God controls your destiny because you do have free will. He is just aware of every choice you will make before you make it.
Yes.
It's not the same thing. And basically that's what these entities are. And of course, Sisko does what a Federation officer does. He makes first contact with them and tries to get them to understand his perspective on linear time. And they don't understand at first. And then Ben Sisko comes to realize he doesn't fully understand it either.
It was interesting, though, because they even did like a flashback, or not a flashback. He was just reliving the moment of him.
In order to communicate,
he was meeting his wife for the first time.
In order to communicate with him, because they are non-corporeal beings, they took the form of, you almost have to think of it as a dream. He's having a dream where these individuals take the form of his wife and his friends and people from his past to talk to him as if in a dream. But they make it very clear, we're not here trying to impersonate anybody or fool you. We are these beings. We just have no other way of communicating with you. But and it doesn't really matter which, in quotes, one of them he's talking to, because he's kind of talking to all of them at once. So when they take different forms, different people in his memory, that's a kind of communication too, right? It's like, there's a reason I'm being the father figure to you now. There's a reason I'm showing up as your wife now. There's a reason that I'm showing up as, whomever, right? And he kind of gets it now. He's talking as if he's talking to one person, and now he can follow it. And they're a little hesitant with him. You're human, you're aggressive, you're antagonistic, and suddenly they're on a baseball diamond. And he goes, antagonistic? It's baseball. It's a game.
It's a game.
And he explains how the game goes. It's antagonistic. He goes, no, it's not. It's fun. The two sides, we play and we have rules and so on and so forth, and we keep score to see who wins, and whoever wins, and whoever doesn't. It's fun. We enjoy the fact that we don't know where the ball's going to go. We try to hit it somewhere where, someone won't be able to catch it or whatever, but they might anticipate, they might not. So they say, you enjoy this not knowing what's going to happen. Yeah, kind of. And he's kind of getting them to understand how, from his, I don't know what's going to happen, so I just got to embrace it, right? And that's when they take him back to Wolf 359. And he's in the middle of the battle again.
Yeah.
And they said, what we don't understand is if you are constantly moving forward in time, why you choose to stay here. That's not linear. And he breaks down in tears and he goes, no, it's not. See, because he has not gotten over his wife's death. And from their perspective, you have not moved on, literally. And any human being would recognize that at least physically it's true. He hasn't moved on. Great character development. Great story setting. This was some brilliant writing. And we haven't even gotten off the first episode.
We haven't gotten we got to move. There's Julian Bashir, Dr. Julian Bashir.
Dr. Julian Bashir brings in all kinds of Star Trek lore with him, going back to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, or actually even further than that, the first appearance of Khan. Yeah, the first appearance of Khan being Space Seed, where they talked about World War III, and they talked about the eugenics wars, and apparently in the late 20th century there was this, eugenics drive, to selectively breed a superpowered race, to do away with weaker people. This is actually kind of true. Look up eugenics. It's a thing that hasn't actually ended yet. It's still happening. Just saying. And because of the rise of the eugenic supermen like Khan Noonien and Singh, Earth abolished all eugenics, all genetic manipulation, all that kind of stuff. Come to find out a little bit later that Dr. Julian Bashir actually is the result of gene therapy for a more advanced human, and his parents have had to hide that. Very Gattaca kind of storyline there.
Legal in the Federation.
Yeah, it was illegal, exactly.
He was born mentally disabled, I'll put it that way, if that's the proper term. And his parents felt bad, so they loved their son. They wanted to do anything to make him better, and he remembers getting smarter, and that's he's a brilliant doctor, but it was through genetic manipulation. And that is a heavy story that really impacts anybody who grew up with a severely mentally handicapped autistic brother, like I did. Right. remember on TNG with Geordie LaForge how he's on the planet where everybody was genetically engineered, or there was some mild genetic engineering, and he's saying, you know, I would never exist on your planet because he was blind. I think he was born blind, wasn't he? Yeah. So he
was.
He has those implants, and they give him some kind. It's like he's like in some ways he's sort of like a cyborg. He has those implants that lets him see things that regular people can't see, but he can't see like a normal person either.
Right.
So it was interesting. But there's Chief O'Brien.
One of my favorite characters. Oh gosh.
Cole
Meany, yes.
Who started out on TNG. He was the guy in the transporter room usually, right?
That's right. You know, he was listed for many seasons as transporter chief. And at a convention, he told a story. He's like, I got so upset. He said, I saw, you know, I was reading the script and I'm not finding any of my lines. And I'm like, they wrote me out. And he said he went to, I don't remember who he said he went to, Michael Pilar or whoever. Yeah. And he's like, you guys wrote me out and didn't even bother to tell me? What are you talking about? Well, I'm supposed to be the transporter chief and you got this guy, Miles O'Brien. They're like, you got a name. Which is, of course, that draws to mind the whole bit from a Galaxy Quest. Guy, I don't even have a name. I'm just crewman number 6 or whatever it is.
And these two form a good friendship actually on the show.
They really do, yeah. And what's great is it's the Indian Brit and the Irishman, right?
Yeah, and it was neat. Yeah, and moving on, we have Odo, who I guess he's there by the grace of the Bajoran government, but he's not Bajoran. He's some kind of alien they found. Is that right?
Exactly, and they don't know anything about. He doesn't even remember his own origin. Yeah, what he does know is that he is a shapeshifter. He can change into really any form he can think of. The problem. Yeah, and I mean like T2 type. You know, he could take the form of a plant or the floor or a bird.
Top. He was a spinning top in one episode, remember?
A spinning top, yeah.
For child, I think, right? He did that at the end.
Exactly. The only thing is that he's not real good with the human form. This is about the best he could do as far as, you know, face and whatnot. In theory, he figures he could disguise himself as specific people, but he just hasn't learned that skill yet. Yeah. And
become animals, though.
He later learns how to do that. At first, he can't, but he eventually does. He also, at the end of the day, has to give up the physical form to rest. So he literally sleeps in a bucket.
Which is fine. I'm not judging. You know,
no,
I mean, he was interesting. So, but I sort of considered him like an honorary Bajoran, because even though he wasn't Bajoran, because he was part of.
And he did hold rank in the Bajoran military, so he was Mm-hmm.
And that's Kira Nerys.
Kira Nerys,
I like her better with the short haircut. I think that worked better on her than the.
Agreed. This was originally a role that was intended to be for yes, it was supposed to be Ensign Rowe, who was played by, I want to say, Michelle Forbes, I think was her name.
Yes, Michelle Forbes.
And I don't remember why they decided not to go with her and to recast her. But this was also a great character. This was just about anybody who served in the Bajoran, or who at the time of Deep Space Nine was in the Bajoran military, had previously been part of a Bajoran underground against the Cardassians.
Fight against the Cardassians, yes.
Right. Think about the French of Dunkirk and all that kind of stuff, you know.
And of course we learn about the Bajorans. This is that's one of the Kais. I forget his name. Was that Apaka?
I forget his name.
He was like their religious leader, right?
They're like priests, exactly.
And he gets killed. Did he get assassinated? I'm not sure. And this Kai takes over.
Kai Wynn, yeah.
And what's interesting is what I like about the show. There are nuances. Not all of the Cardassians are bad, and not all of the Bajorans are good. Kai Wynn is not a good guy.
No. She's very duplicitous. You find at a later point in time she's kind of working with the Cardassians, which is just anathema,
Yeah.
I mean, you're literally selling out your people in a way, but it's all opportunistic.
Yeah.
Really, really well written plots in this show. Yeah.
And
There's that wormhole. Yeah. So
Uh,
the wormhole, because it's a stable wormhole, it ends up becoming a hub of trade, right? Just like if you imagine a port, right?
This is a
If
whole
you could,
new area of space that they can go to that they can't.
you
get
can
to
literally go
otherwise.
through it safely to the other side, the Gamma Quadrant, which of course opens up some other dangers,
We'll get
right?
there. We'll get there. But
And
before we even
but they have to move. They literally have to move the station because when the Cardassians here find out about it, they want to claim it for themselves. But we need to have something physically there at the mouth of that wormhole to lay claim to it. So they literally rig up the station to be able to move it with maneuvering thrusters and like a warp bubble to get it there. And they're gonna defend it until until they can establish their claim. It's a really good first episode, establishing that. And the Federation says, well, they're a protectorate of ours, so their claim is good, and we recognize their claim. And if you don't like it, that means we go back to war, guys.
Gul Dukat, possibly best TV villain of all time.
He was good.
I still like the cigarette smoking man the best from X-Files, but no, he is a great villain. And the funny thing is, at the beginning of the series, he doesn't start out completely villainous. Like, he actually would communicate with Cisco. He was sort of his on-point guy in Cardassia, right?
Yeah.
And there was an interesting thing where, like, did an old program get released where Gul Dukat was accusing his men of banning the station, and there were, like, security protocol in place, and, like, it's like, this is an old Cardassian program. They couldn't get off the ship. So then they actually bring Gul Dukat over. Dukat just deactivate this for us. All right. So
yeah, exactly. And that's very interesting too, because I couldn't help but think about the Harkonnens leaving Arrakis.
Yeah.
In Dune, right? And then when they get there, there's all these booby traps and stuff. Yeah, well, the Cardassians had done that too,
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's plain simple Garrick. Remember him?
Garrick is a Cardassian who stays behind because he's a tailor and he has a shop. They turn this into a commerce location, so it's like a big mall, right? Yeah, you got food courts and you got and he's got a tailor shop, and he's a very talented tailor, but it's pretty clear that he's there as a Cardassian spy. He's reporting back to the Cardassians, and sometimes they use that fact to get information to the Cardassians. Sometimes false information, sometimes real information that they need the Cardassians to have. It's very, very, very clever intrigue they build into this story.
Remember when he told a story about why he got stranded out there? Because during the occupation, he was supposed to torture some Bajoran children.
Right.
And he knew they didn't have any information. They were just telling him, you got to do it because it's an order, and he wouldn't do it. And I think he actually gave them some money or some food before he can kick them out, and he got in big trouble over that because he actually decided to help some Bajoran children instead of torturing them.
What's really interesting is whenever they talk about stories during the occupation, if you're a real World War II buff, you will find analogs that they drew from.
Yeah.
You really will.
Speaking of this analog, I don't know if this is from like another movie or play if this really happened, but this was a Cardassian commander. I forget his name, but they finally
Gul Darheel?
Yeah, and I think they caught him, and Kira's like, we finally got him. Like, he was a butcher. He was one of these war criminals, right?
Yeah, so he would have. What they claimed was he was this Cardassian who was the butcher of something or other. Think of him as being like Dr. Mengele or something like that.
And he was going like, what you call genocide, I call a day's work. Remember, he would say all those things.
Yeah, he just chewed the scene. He was like Mr. Villainous.
Yeah.
The only good Bajoran was a dead Bajoran, all this kind of stuff.
And we find out at the end of the episode, he is not this guy. This guy actually
He is not. And they say to him, why are you claiming to be this person who he's not? And you find out that he's got a backstory where he feels so horrible about what the Cardassians did to the Bajorans. he said, this criminal needs to be punished.
It needs to.
So he's willing to stand in and take that punishment, so that the Bajorans can heal.
Oh, Maritza, that was his name.
Maritza, right. Thank you.
Maritza, I'm not that worm. Yeah. Was like the real name was. I'm not that worm. Yeah.
Right.
And they're interesting entries. I remember there was one where Cardassians were after Kira because we were just the servants, and you were killing servants in your bombings. Well, we had to get to the thing. It was one of these.
Yeah, exactly.
Understood from their point of view, they weren't involved in this war. They were just, they were. But we got lots of stuff with the Ferengi. I think that was from a time travel episode, if I remember, though. But there we have.
This was an episode called "Little Green Men,"
yes.
where Quark, his nephew, and his brother are on a Ferengi shuttlecraft that crashes in New Mexico in what was it, 1940 something or other.
Yes, and this is where.
And you're supposed to believe this was the whole Roswell incident
thing, which is funny, actually.
It is very funny, and as I recall, they don't identify themselves as Ferengi. I'm not sure because that would have altered history or something like that. But it's some really good interaction with the humans. I didn't like the Ferengi in Star Trek: Next Generation, but I love them in Deep Space Nine. They started out very poorly with. They were built up in Next Generation to be the big villains, and when they finally did it, it was executed so poorly it was laughable.
I think they've gone to fill the role of like a Cyrano Jones or a Harry Mudd. Except it's like a race of them.
But as time went on, they did eventually get around to making them formidable villains, because you realize that some of these ultra capitalists, you have the equivalent of what's it called? The IRS agent, that shows up to audit you. And he hires Nothings. Right, exactly. But they also have some other, when they introduce other captain characters that have their own Ferengi marauders, they're like pirate captains, right? And they're like badasses. Their ships are comparable to Federation ships and could hold their own, but they're out there as privateers, and they don't mess around.
No. Quark in his relationship with his brother Rom, is that right?
Rom, exactly.
Rom is an idiot. He couldn't fix the Strava's bent, says Odo. Odo was wrong. He actually has some engineering.
Yeah, he was actually quite talented with electronics, and he passed that along to his son, who ended up becoming an engineer in the Federation.
First Ferengi Starfleet officer.
Yep.
And
the Grand Nagus. It's inconceivable.
I knew that was the actor. It's funny because I'm remembering his voice, and I'm thinking because that actor was on that show Evil as a character, and I realized it's the inconceivable guy, and that's who he was in Princess Bride. Yep. And here he is as the Grand Nagus, and I love how wrinkly he is. I love how Ferengi wrinkle different than others.
Not only is he wrinkled, look at the hair in his ear. That is a makeup effect. They had to add hair to his ears.
But I guess what I'm trying to illustrate, though, even before we get to other things from the other side of the wormhole, there's intrigue on this side of the wormhole, just with the races there.
Oh, yeah.
The Maquis are big on this show.
That's exactly right. So the Maquis are ex-Federation officers like Rolaren, who have left the Federation over
land
disagreements about what they're doing or not doing against the Cardassians, giving up territory to the Cardassians out of appeasement, so on and so forth. I mean, it would not be unlike some, soldier or civilian in the United States moving to Eastern Europe to take up arms in a, hypothetical battle against a former ally, from World War II. Just saying, just hypothetically.
Okay. Well, I just took it as that as they're they just didn't agree with the decisions of the Federation.
Yes, that is true. Yes.
And I remember and this is why Benjamin, he didn't like the guy already, but then he made a point that, the Federation are worse than the Borg, and he gave some reason for why the Federation are worse than the Borg. And when Sisko heard that, he got incensed. Because, of course, he hates the Borg because the Borg killed his wife. And
Exactly.
This thing he serves. And it's funny, the conflict that Kira's even talking to him is like, these guys are going after Cardassians. Why are you attacking your own people? These are your own people. She was actually sympathetic with their plight, actually, which I thought was interesting, where she's looking at it from the point of view of Bajoran. She's like, I understand why these people are also having issues with the Cardassians.
Exactly.
But I did want to make a point, though. Somebody made a point that there was an episode where the Megas got realigned by the prophets. I guess to be generous and to go against like Ferengi teachings about profit above all, like they made.
Yeah,
which I thought was funny. But here we go. We first see our first members of the Dominion at the end of one of the
Jem'Hadar.
Season 2 or Season 3 when they show up, and they're from an organization called the Dominion. Yeah, we don't know what the Dominion are. In fact, first we think these might be the leaders of the Dominion. We find out that is not the case. These are just one of the races that make up the Dominion, which I would argue is like an evil federation, basically.
Yeah, I guess you could absolutely see it that way. Very totalitarian.
Yeah. Yes.
This is the Jem'Hadar are a literally genetically created race, created by the leaders of the Dominion, the founders.
The founders.
And what's really insidious about it is those little tubes on their necks dispense a drug called Ketracel White.
Yep.
And Ketracel is it contains certain elements they need to survive. So without it, they will die, and it's also performance enhancing. So it, makes them somewhat super soldiers.
It's a substance they're addicted to, so it's how to keep them in check too.
But they are also mentally, programmed to see their leaders as gods. They accept any command that they give as though it's holy writ. And in fact, their motto is "Victory is life." In other words, yes, Mark's quoting it there. Victory is life. They will happily die rather than be non-victorious, right?
They were very anxious and excited to fight Klingons. I remember they were saying that, right?
Yep. Another warrior race, exactly.
They were very interested to see. They didn't care as much about the humans. They wanted to fight Klingons. I remember that. What was his race's name again? I forget, but that's the great Jeffrey Combs.
I believe his character's name was Weyoun. And again, a race where they get cloned. So if you killed off Weyoun, you'd get another Weyoun in the next episode.
This was anti-Prime Directive, what the founders did. What happened was one of the founders was running from some people who wanted to destroy him, and he had to hide, and these ape-like creatures hit him for protection. And the founders rewarded this group of more primitive creatures and basically gave them intelligence and other things and raised them up for helping protect them from
the Vorta. That was their name. The Vorta.
Yes. Which that was interesting. Were these the Breen?
The Breen, yes.
They came later in the series, but they also ended up allying themselves.
There is a theory that, and this is not established, it's only been speculated, that the Breen may have been the first contact race for the Klingons, the race that the Klingons came to call the Herc, but we are not certain of that fact, so don't know. But there's a lot of Klingons that really, really hate the Breen.
Jem'Hadar believe they are already dead and they go into battle, they reclaim their life. Interesting. But of course, I don't know if I put her picture up here, but of course, well, we find out who the founders are. It's a big twist. Right. If you haven't seen the show, I won't spoil it for you, but
yeah.
I don't want to. I feel like we're giving a lot of spoilers already. The war with the Dominion breaks out because they can come through the wormhole, and of course, they've already taken over the Gamma Quadrant. Now they want to take over. What is it? The Delta Quadrant? That's Star Trek.
Well, it's the alpha and beta quadrants that actually the Earth is in the beta quadrant, but the alpha and beta quadrants are, like right next to each other. So our sphere of influence is kind of through both of them.
Klingons end up getting involved in this war.
Yep. So this is Martok. He loses an eye in battle against the Jem'Hadar, and there's some very interesting intrigue before we find out some of the secrets about the Jem'Hadar. They have replaced some of the leaders, and sometimes even lower ranking people in the various factions with infiltrators, one of whom is Martok. And it causes a good deal of miscommunication and strife between the Allied forces.
Right, because basically,
until they figure out who the imposters are.
Okay, come on, son. Okay, well, we all know the founders end up being Odo's race, the Changelings.
Right.
And they can look like anyone or anything, and so they they're able to infiltrate Federation space, Klingon Empire, and they can pretend to be the other side. It becomes a real.
And like problem. I said, their race can take the form of any individual. It's just that Odo has not figured out how to do that himself yet.
Yeah. There, the Romulans and the Cardassians get involved. I think this was the Tal Shiar and the Jem'Hadar, right? Not Jem'Hadar.
Yep.
What was the Obsidian Order? Yeah,
Tal Obsidian Shiar. Order. Yeah, exactly.
And which were they're both secret police societies in both their civilizations. And they have a plan to wipe out the founders. They found their home planet, and things go horribly wrong, and then they get wiped out instead.
Of course.
And this was a major thing on Star Trek. These were two major organizations in the lore that are gone. After that episode. This was a harsh series. You got to see Federation ships, like top Starfleet ships, getting torn apart in this war. I remember there was one kind of terrifying episode where the ship was being run by young cadets, and Jake Sisko and Nog are on the ship, and basically they're obsessed with just taking out this one Dominion battle station. They know how to do it. They've worked it all out, and they don't want to go home and get reinforcement. They want to take it on themselves and get the glory, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of shows that our nice civilized humans that are so much better in the future. Well, not necessarily. When war hits, some of the baser instincts pop out, don't they? And of course, that whole fight against this thing goes horribly wrong for them too. Remember that?
Yeah.
It's just it's almost a heart wrenching because you're watching this series and you're thinking the Dominion can actually win this thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the most formidable foes the Federation has gone up against. I won't spoil how this show ends.
And when they finally come up with a weapon they can use against them, it's a doomsday weapon. And they have a moral quandary over it. I mean, it's kind of like World War II. Do we drop the bomb and wipe out whole populations or not?
Never give a group of college kids a starship. The Red Squad, right? Yeah, like I said, they could have done a series out of it, but it only lasted 3 episodes before they got it. But it's funny.
Well, they did end up making a series out of it. I mean, they call it Lower Decks, or what's the other one? The other animated one.
Oh, I didn't watch that one.
Yeah, I didn't watch either of them. I don't know.
I heard the other one was the best of the Paramount Star Trek series, the new ones, but I didn't bother with it because I don't know. I just didn't care.
Yeah, it's like when I told my wife the other day. I've had a rough number of bowel movements, and the last one I had was the best one I had.
Now I'm thinking of that line from Glenn Ross. You ever take a dump that makes you think like you slept, that makes you feel like you slept for a year? Remember that?
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway,
Prodigy. That's it. Yeah,
Prodigy. But here we go. I did want to mention too on this show, there's all kinds of intrigue on this show.
Yeah,
this war doesn't last a season. This lasts a few seasons. I remembered there was a point in time where Galron got angry and wanted to go to war with the Federation during this fracas. Remember that? And they were fighting Klingons again for a period. It was just, and it's funny. I didn't mention him with the regular, but Worf eventually shows up on this show.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought there was a fascinating scene in one episode where Dax, confides in Sisko, says, "Worf, what's wrong with him? Why is he acting this way wrong?" He says, "He's intimidated by you," which he tells Sisko, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah.
That's how tough Sisko is.
Yeah, exactly.
Was intimidated by him because Sisko got
Yeah.
He had to, because they were in a war situation, and I don't think that was his natural state, but he did rise to the occasion. He's on the front lines of this awful conflict the Federation gets dragged into. But I'm
Don't
not
worry, guys. I'm going to get myself some prune juice.
funny. But I did also want to mention, though, there's also other intrigue on this. Like, there's religious intrigue that goes on during the series too, especially because there's a sect of Bajorans that believe in these things called the Pa Wraiths. Remember them?
Yeah, they'd be like the shadow versions of the
of the prophets.
Of the prophets, yeah.
Yeah, and I think Gul Dukat even ends up leading a cult
right
for a while, and it's that's the thing about this show. It never missed, especially later on in seasons. There was always something going on. If it wasn't War at the Dominion, it was this other side thing. It was good writing. One of the best Star Trek series. Probably the most underrated Star Trek series too. I'll say that. But
I agree. And like the other shows, it starts out slow. All this intrigue that we're talking about doesn't start out right away. We have a lot that we get hit with in the first episode, but then the next couple episodes are pretty, almost kind of lame, actually, in a lot of ways.
It helps with world building, though. I'll say
it
that,
does.
though. When they get into the big conflicts, though, they at least have their world building down, where we know these are the stakes, these are these races, what they think, blah, blah. And I think it's a definitely show that did improve as it went on. And again, I do have to watch it from beginning to end. I like the idea of the war in season 6 and 7. Okay. Like
one other thing I need to say is that I have always complained that Star Trek had a real problem with their marketing. When they should have been putting out toys, action figures, costumes, role-play devices, and role-playing games, they were never doing it. And it was right around, just before Deep Space Nine, they opened up an agreement with a game company called Decipher. They put out a role-playing game and a customizable card game. And the role-playing game ended up getting really, really good, to the point that they were putting out source books for example, the Dominion War, and the material was really good. They came right to the edge of creating new continuity and new canon without actually doing it. They implied things, and they said, if you want to go there, you can, but they never really went beyond what you saw in the show, which is a lot easier to do when you've had, 7 seasons of Next Gen, 7 seasons of Deep Space Nine, the 3 seasons of the original series, a bunch of movies, they're starting Voyager and whatnot. There's a lot to work with there, as opposed to, oh yeah, we just have 3 seasons and we're going to make stuff up beyond that,
And that's the leader of the Dominion.
Yeah, they referred to us as the female changeling. We didn't have a name. They didn't take names. They had a group consciousness when they would turn to goo. They literally on their planet existed in a pond all together. And when they wanted to communicate, one of them would come up in this kind of a humanoid form. And if they touched each other, they could pass on all the knowledge of the group mind. So literally, when Odo finally meets them, he's able to get back his memory of having been one of them, that he had been sent out by them as a scout, I suppose. But he also passes something back to them as well. His feelings for the people in the Federation, the potential that they have, and so forth. The founders,
not upon the Great Lake. Okay, well, I guess there's a lot of creatures. The
Great Link, actually. The Great Link is what they call it.
Oh, it could have been a Great Lake, too. A great Link. That was a Great Lake.
Yes, that's what they referred to it as.
Anyway, but that we could talk about Deep Space Nine probably for another 3 hours. It's a very, I want to say it's kind of a dense Star Trek series, and there's probably a lot we already missed. Like we didn't even talk about the episode where they combined with the Trouble of Tribbles. Remember that they did the Forrest Gump
Troubles and Tribulations, yes, where they actually touch on the fact that the Klingons look different than Worf.
And I liked it when Worf said, "Worf, that's a Klingon. We don't like to talk about it." Remember, that's what he said.
They're going back and they're sitting there, and he says, "Can I get a Raktajino? If I hear one more person ask for a Raktajino, we don't carry Raktajino." Well, who asked for Raktajino? The Klingons. Klingons where? And she goes, there, and there. And they look at the Klingons, and then they look at Worf, and Worf's like, "They are Klingons." And they're like, "What happened? Was there some sort of a genetic manipulation or some sort of a massive accident or something like that?" And Worf just goes, "We do not discuss it with outsiders."
Yes. and then they did the what do you call it? They did the instead of the holodeck where it was like a Sam Spade type thing on TNG,
right.
It was more like James Bond, right? It was
and Dr. Bashir. I think the episode that they introduced that was Dr. Bashir, I presume, or something like that.
Julian Bashir. Julian
Bashir, yeah, exactly.
He was like a Bond character, yeah, I remember that.
It was another one of those holodeck type episodes, right? Yeah, where something goes wrong and the people inside become their characters and whatnot, and he's gotta end the scenario. He's gotta win the scenario without anyone dying, because they would die in real life. And Sisko is the villain. He's the
Dr. Noah, Dr. Hippocrates.
They call him Dr. Noah, but he's like Dr. No or Scaramond or whatever the James Bond baddie is.
He's got the Asian suit. That was
and it's brilliant because all the characters are together and they have the big denouement scene where he tells what his whole big plan to destroy the Earth is. Right? He's going to wipe out all life, and I'll be the king and everything. And the scenario is supposed to go that the James Bond character is supposed to kill off all the baddies and survive and win the day and save the world. But if he kills everybody, these are all his friends.
So he has to.
So he thinks it through and he goes, "Okay, go ahead, destroy the world. I'll join you."
Yeah.
He's like, I mean it. I'm going to destroy the world. Yeah, I'm going to let you. You want me to press the button? I'll press the button myself. He presses the button, the world is destroyed, and they're all standing there, and he's like, "I am the ruler of the world." He's like, "Yes, you are. You win. Game over," and that's how he saves everybody.
Yes, I remember that. But a ton of Klingon culture came from Deep Space Nine. Soldiers of the Empire, the Sword of Kahless, once more into the breach with Kang, Kor, and
I didn't even want to go down that road, Mark, because I'll be here for the next 10 hours. Yeah.
Mary's Jadzia. That's interesting. Yeah.
And, you know how I am with that stuff.
Those were done right. So definitely classic science fiction series. When you wonder why they're trekkers out there in the world, it's because of shows like Deep Space Nine. So
yeah,
there you go. And you know what?
I miss shows like that. We don't have Star Trek like that anymore. We haven't for a very, very, very long time.